Stood my ground, refused to let my freeloading brother move in despite family pressure, and now I'm challenging them to take him instead. I'm 37, an accountant, and married to my amazing husband, who's 36. I absolutely love him to bits. Together, we have a 13-year-old son, just your average kid, though he's not the biggest fan of my brother. Honestly, I don't blame him. Right now, I'm desperately trying to learn about anime for my son's sake, but let's just say, that mountain is steeper than I thought. My brother, who's 32, has never lived with us, and I'd like to keep it that way. Recently, he landed himself in trouble. He got himself kicked out of my would-be sister-in-law's house, the one he was supposedly going to marry. Why? Because apparently, you can't trash talk your partner to your buddies, call her a scary lawyer, and expect that word not to reach her. Surprise, she kicked him out. Now comes the ask. My family wants me to take my brother in. We do have an extra bedroom, but it's really meant for my parents when they visit. Our house is pretty big, so on paper, it looks like an easy solution. Here's the problem, though. Whenever you give my brother anything, be it toys, clothes, even money, it's as good as gone forever. The only way to see those things again is to sneak into his room and take them back yourself. He just doesn't give anything up. Expectations, boundaries, even common courtesy, none of it lands for him. My biggest fear is that if I let my brother set a single foot in my house, he'll never leave until I literally chase him out, maybe even with that old metal bat I found in our basement when we moved in. On top of all this, he doesn't have a job. I don't want another kid to take care of. I already have one, and that's plenty for me, thank you very much. Worse, every single time my brother talks to my son, it turns into some sort of life intervention, and not the helpful kind. My husband and I put our foot down. We said no. He's not moving in. He's not even getting a toe over the threshold. Of course, my family isn't having it. They insist we should help my brother because he's family and family should help family. The pressure is constant. So now I'm asking myself, would I be the bad guy if I just started replying to every family message about my brother with, "You think family should help family?" I think that's a great idea, you should do it. And then just keep repeating that, no matter how many times they bring it up? After seeing how intense this situation became, I sat down with my husband. Together, we wrote a slightly modified version of that message and sent it out to everyone in the family in one big blast. Now I'm bracing myself. I'll update on what happens next in a week or whenever the fallout lands. Update 1. After all the stress, I found a strange sense of camaraderie. Whether people genuinely cared or were just watching through the window of family drama, I appreciated it. I decided not to tell my husband and son about all the suggestions and encouragement. Instead, I kept their world a little quieter. With my husband's help, I crafted a letter. He's always good with words, but this time we even reached out to Joe's ex, let's call her Nighthawk, who just so happens to be a lawyer, albeit not officially representing us. We thought she could give the letter some backbone, maybe punch it up with that legal gravitas nobody in the Smith family could ignore. The aim was clear, no more ambiguity when it came to Joe. For the sake of keeping things readable, I'll use Smith for our last name and Joe for my brother. Don't worry, my real name's not nearly so plain. The letter itself was something else, direct, respectful, a little bold. We made our stance unshakable, and my favorite part was the close. If anyone feels strongly that Joe needs a place, our door is not the one to knock on, but yours absolutely could be. We fully support anyone in the family opening their home to him and showing how family support is done. We love you all, but we're not sacrificing our home stability to prove our loyalty. That is our final word on the matter. With love and boundaries, Op and family. After sending that, I braced for the fallout. For 2 days, our phones chirped nonstop with family messages, rapid-fire attempts to guilt us into submission. But we stood our ground. We flipped every accusation back on them, making it clear that if anyone wanted to throw around the bad family argument, they'd need to take a good look in the mirror. I had underestimated how persistent people could be when you stopped playing their game, but after a couple days, they quieted down. No threats of burning bridges, no disinvitations to family picnics. Just silence, the most peaceful silence I'd had in some time. It turns out we might have dodged a bullet, one that would have exploded right in our kitchen if we hadn't set these boundaries. Before things came to a head, we'd already spoken to the police. Thanks to a few favors, my husband's got the right connections. They were well aware of the situation. If Joe tried to force his way into our house, there would be no "but I live here" loophole. I wanted to be clear, Joe is not a resident. If he turns up, unless we invite him in, he's trespassing. Ironically, while my husband and I were off enjoying a rare peaceful weekend at my in-laws, Joe made his move. The in-laws, saints, truly, just the loving aunties and grandmas, were keeping my son happy and the house blissfully free from drama. While we were gone, I got a call from my parents. Joe had gotten into trouble with the police. He wasn't arrested, thankfully, and he wasn't hurt. I have to be grateful for that. But apparently, late at night, Joe showed up at our house, banging on the door, trying to get in, only to find no one home. He didn't give up, though. Neighbors, not recognizing him, thought they were witnessing a break-in, so they called the cops. The police arrived, questioned him, and he tried to claim residency, but the cops already knew better. When that story didn't fly, Joe switched tactics and told them he didn't have anywhere to go. The officers called my parents with an ultimatum: either come pick up Joe, or he'd be headed to a shelter and social services would get involved. So, my parents came to the rescue, late at night, and Joe is now stretched out on their couch. Crisis averted for now, at least from our household. In other family news, Nighthawk, Joe's ex, who I'll always call that, because it fits, remains friends with my husband. She's made it crystal clear she'll never take Joe back to her nest. Sometimes, the best decisions are the ones not to go back. As for my son, he's doing just fine. I'm still climbing the learning curve on his favorite anime, and I don't always understand it, but he appreciates the effort. When I told him, in vague terms, that things had calmed down, he smiled and said he was glad Joe wouldn't be living with us. I kept all the drama and concern that people showed for him quiet and tucked away. Sometimes, the best way to love a child is to give them peace. And for now, at least, our house remains our own, peaceful, stable, and exactly the way I want it. Update 2. For those who don't know me, here's what happened. My brother, Joe, completely shattered any trust he had with his ex, Nighthawk. Inevitably, he got thrown out. Things got frosty between us all, basically a cold war, and my neighbors even thought they'd spotted someone trying to break in at one point. Eventually, Joe landed back at my parents' place. Now, my parents were getting more and more fed up with Joe's habit of leeching off them and doing nothing useful around the house. Their brilliant scheme? Convince Nighthawk to take Joe back. Problem is, Nighthawk has absolutely zero respect left for him. So, my parents decided what they needed was a dramatic gesture, something big to reignite the spark. From the moment I heard this, I told them flat out it was a terrible idea, and that if they tried anything, they'd be lucky if Nighthawk didn't metaphorically summon an entire murder of crows to exact revenge. My husband was right there with me, emphasizing that they really needed to understand what they were about to get into. Even my son, young but sharp as a tack, put it best: this wasn't some Hallmark movie, and it wasn't going to end happily ever after. But of course, they went ahead with it anyway. I only found out when Nighthawk called me herself, fuming about how my parents and Joe had staged some kind of party ambush on her in the parking lot where she works. Apparently, she tore into all of them, Joe and my parents alike, right there. When I relayed the story at home, my son quipped, "Honestly, if I were Aunt Nighthawk, I think I'd have preferred an actual ambush. At least then I'd have had a reason to use a brick I'd keep in my purse." Don't worry, I did have a talk with him about violence. Soon after, my parents phoned to tell me their plan had crashed and burned spectacularly. They were upset, called me cruel, and accused me of not helping them. That's when I lost my temper. I exploded over the phone, yelling that their idea was idiotic, that it would never work, and that I was looking out for myself by refusing to get involved. I told them if they were so miserable with the holes they dug, maybe they should have put down the shovel a long time ago. That's when my mom started to panic, and I just hung up the phone. Update 3. The silence didn't last more than a day. At 1:13 a.m., my phone lit up with the doorbell camera feed, my parents' minivan idling across the street like they were casing the place, and Joe dragging 2 bulging trash bags up our walkway. He tucked them behind the boxwoods, then tried to wedge one under the bench like it was contraband, and my front porch was a dead drop. My husband was out of bed before I even had the blanket off my legs. He hit the intercom. "Joe. Move the bags, you're not staying here." Joe stared dead into the little glowing ring. "I live here," he said, like repeating it could conjure reality. Then he stuck a hand in his pocket and read off a number. "See? I changed my address. Mail's coming." I could hear my parents whisper fighting in the driveway, Mom hissing, Dad telling her to just let it happen. I called the non-emergency line, and when the officer rolled up 2 minutes later, we met him out front in pajamas and common sense. Joe tried to sell the "I live here" line again, now with a big finish. He pulled a crumpled delivery slip with our address and his name on it like it was a deed. I handed the officer a copy of the letter we'd sent, plus the trespass warning we filed after the last stunt. He didn't even have to read the whole thing. He turned to Joe and said, evenly, "I'm not going to say this twice. Remove your property from this porch immediately." Watching my parents' faces when the police told them to load the bags back into the minivan felt like watching something heavy slip from their hands. Denial, maybe. Dad did it, tight-lipped. Mom wouldn't look at me. Before he left, the officer suggested we call the post office first thing, because address changes are not magical keys, and people like to think they are. We thanked him and went back inside. The house felt cold even after the heat kicked on. I was at the post office when it opened. The clerk didn't blink. She canceled the change, flagged our address, and had me sign a form basically saying, "No mail here for Joseph Smith." I froze my credit on my phone in the parking lot and called our precinct to file the trespass affidavit that lets officers act even if we're not home. Nighthawk, when I looped her in, emailed me actual language to print and tape to the inside of our glass storm door. It read like it could cut. I thought that would be the crescendo. It wasn't. That afternoon, the school called me. "Hi, Mrs. Smith," said the secretary's careful voice. "We have a gentleman here to pick up your son. He says he's an uncle. He is not on the list. I don't think I've moved that fast since labor. My husband beat me there." We pulled into the lot 1 car apart, and I saw Joe through the office windows, leaning back in the chair like he was trying to look casual. My son was in a counselor's office down the hall, bored and safe, because the staff at our school are the exact kind of people you bake cupcakes for forever. My husband handled the talk. Calm, no theatrics. The principal stood with him. Joe's swagger slipped faster than I thought it would when the police liaison stepped in and reminded him that attempting to remove a child without authorization can become a very big problem very fast. He left with the same 2 bags of nothing he keeps bringing into rooms that don't want them. We added a pickup password to our file. We gave the receptionist a photo of Joe. My son, on the way home, climbed in, clicked his seatbelt, and said, "So we're doing a filler episode today, huh?" He watched me for a reaction. "Sorry," he added. "Bad joke." "It's not filler," I said. "It's world building." He laughed at that, and then we talked about reality being less fun than anime, and how power-ups in life look a lot like boundaries. My parents called when we were eating dinner. I let it ring. Then Mom left a voicemail that started with the sound of her trying not to cry and ended with the kind of apology that isn't one. They had no choice. They miss the boy. They just want the family to be together. She said she was scared Joe would end up on the street. Then she said we were cruel. The next morning, Dad texted just 3 words, "We changed locks." It turned out, while we were at the school, Joe had walked out of their house with a jewelry box that had belonged to my grandmother. Mom noticed. They confronted him, and he told them he was repurposing and that they would see the money later. Dad told him to get out. Joe called his bluff, because he's always called everyone's bluff and been right. Except this time there was a locksmith in the driveway. For once, the shovel hit rock. Dad asked if we'd pay for a motel for a couple nights, just so he doesn't do something desperate. I almost said no and hung up. Instead, I took a breath and told him I'd send a list. And I did: shelters, the Community Resource Center, a temp agency that hires from the walk-in line, a clinic that does intake without insurance, and the number for the outreach officer who already knew Joe by name. I printed the list and dropped it in their mailbox. I did not ring the bell. Nighthawk called me that evening, not to gossip but to tell me she'd filed a report about the parking lot ambush and that if my parents reached out to her again, she would pursue a protective order. Her voice was calm. Cold water calm. "I'm not playing house with anyone's delusions," she said. I told her she didn't owe me an explanation. She said she wasn't giving one. That night we sat down with our son and gave him the plain version of the facts, nothing scary, no details he didn't need. He asked if we were mad at Grandpa. I told him I'm mad at choices, not people, and that sometimes loving someone looks like stepping away so they can feel the consequences. He nodded like he got it and went back to his homework, which, insult to injury, was algebra I had to Google. By the weekend, the quiet had a different shape. No minivans. No late-night doorbell. No texts with guilt entangled in them. Just the hum of a normal Saturday. We bought a door chain that makes my husband feel better. We scheduled a meeting with the school's SRO to sign the trespass notice for campus. I met our neighbor by the mailbox and thanked her for calling the cops the first time. I told her if a tall man with haunted eyes lurked again, she had my blessing to be the town crier. On Sunday afternoon, Mom came by alone, no warning, no car idling across the street, no bags. She stood at the bottom step and wouldn't cross the line I told her not to. She apologized without add-ons, just that one word, and then said, "I don't know how to be his mother and not let him sink." "Maybe it's time you find out," I said, not unkindly. "Maybe we all do." She nodded, once, the way people do when they don't like what they're hearing but know it's true. Then she went back to her car. We haven't heard from Joe since the school incident. According to my dad's one-sentence updates, he's been bouncing. I hope he chooses a place that makes him stop. I hope he stops long enough to choose anything else. I hope my parents keep their locks changed and their eyes open. I hope my son never has to make a joke like that again. Update 4. It was early. I had my second cup in the same chipped mug and the kind of domestic stillness I now treat like a rare bird. Don't breathe too loud or it flies off. I hit submit, watched the little bar creep across, and got that red line nobody wants: "Your dependent has already been claimed." My coffee went cold in a very specific way. I called my husband into the office and he stood behind me the way he does when the engine light comes on, hands on the back of my chair, saying nothing, while his jaw tells me everything. We both looked at our son's name on the screen like it was a bruise. I'd love to tell you I didn't immediately think Joe. That would be generous. I went straight to practical. I set the kettle to boil and started a list, not of suspects, but steps. I filed the report. I put a packet together with copies and the sort of tidy tabs that make me feel like I'm building a fence with paper. I froze our son's credit and wrote his name in big block letters across the front of a new folder, because sometimes the only control you get is choosing the label. By noon, a bright, happy piece of plastic arrived in our mailbox addressed to my son, the kind of card you load a refund onto when you don't have a bank. The envelope had confetti printed on the inside flaps and the word welcome. Like this was a party. I stood in the hallway and stared at it. Then I slid it, unopened, into the folder and called the number on the back using speakerphone and full spine. I didn't have to say much beyond minor and identity theft. The woman on the line kept her voice soft and efficient, like a nurse unwrapping a needle. I texted my dad a question I already knew the answer to. Did you give Joe the boy's social? He replied with the kind of long pause only a screen can hold. Then, he said he could fix your taxes since you were being stubborn. The word fix sat there and rotted. I felt that old metal bat at the bottom of the stairs in my bones. The next day, Nighthawk had her hearing. I went. I sat on the hard bench in the back, next to a woman with a notebook and a tired ponytail who was there for some other man's apologies. The courtroom was exactly the temperature of an office you don't want to work in. The judge wore glasses that read as unimpressed from 50 feet. When it was their turn, Nighthawk and Joe were called, and the air in the room got that tight shimmer like everyone's chest had the same small knot. Nighthawk didn't play to the room. She just told it, dry, precise, no theater. The parking lot ambush. The texting flare shot into the night sky. The way I miss you turns into you owe me when you don't give it back. Joe tried to argue with the calendar. He tried to make his voice big. The judge cut him down to size with one sentence and a look. This is not debate club. When the order was granted, I watched the stamp come down. It landed like consequence. On the way out, Joe caught my eye through the doorway and mouthed something that looked like traitor. The bailiff moved, just a step, and he turned his face away like there was suddenly something very interesting about a light fixture. We got home to a voicemail from the state revenue office asking me to call their investigator back. He was the kind of man who introduces himself with first name, last initial, and the date. He told me, evenly, that they'd traced the attempt to file to a public computer at a library 2 towns over, and that the listed contact number had been disconnected within an hour. He asked if I wanted to be notified if their case touched ours. Yes, I said. Yes, I do. He thanked me like I'd just returned a casserole dish. That night, my dad texted, "Come by tomorrow?" Alone. He doesn't often ask for me without my husband attached, like some sort of social seatbelt. I went early. Mom was at the table with a legal pad and that small, wrecked look people get when they've been crying but didn't give themselves time to finish. She didn't waste mine. "He stole your grandmother's ring," she said. "Pawned it. He told the man he'd be back with the papers later." I sat down. She handed me the pawn ticket like it weighed the same as a ring. Dad had already filed the report. He told me the officer took it without resignation this time, just a series of nods and a card left on the table. "I changed the locks again," he said, as if locks were a hobby now. We didn't talk about taxes. We didn't talk about the little boy whose name I'd written in block letters. We made a plan to go to the pawn shop in the morning with the report and a photo of my grandmother's hands, because that's the only close-up we had of the ring. It felt like we were bringing a photograph of a person to the morgue. On the way out, Dad stopped at the door like someone had pulled on an invisible leash. "We went to a meeting," he said. "A room with coffee." The way he said coffee made it sound like code. We listened. His eyes didn't meet mine, and for once, I didn't make them. I told him I was proud of him and meant it. He looked like that was a harder thing to hold than his grief. By afternoon, our mailbox drama tried one more angle. A man in a neon vest I didn't recognize was in our yard, poking around near the gas meter with a work order flapping on a clipboard. My husband stepped out with his own brand of patient suspicion. "Start service for Unit B," the man said, reading, "Basement apartment." "We don't have a basement apartment. We don't have a Unit B. What we have is a brother who thinks grown-up life is a series of forms you can fill out to change the shape of a house." The tech was fine. He looked at our license, our deed copy, our very real lack of stairs to an underground anything, and canceled the order on his tablet. "People try this," he said, not unkindly. "They think paper is magic." He left us standing in our own grass feeling both relieved and mildly deranged. That evening, our son came home from a friend's. He dumped his backpack, took one look at our faces, and said, carefully, "Boss fight?" "Cutscene," I said. "We watch and we save and we see what happens." He nodded like he'd been expecting that line. Before bed, I went through the motions, doors, windows, the little chain my husband added that clicks into place with the exact sound of a boundary. The folder with our son's name went onto the top shelf. The pawn ticket under a magnet. My phone on the nightstand, face down. I don't have a neat ending. What I have is a text before midnight from an unknown number that turned out to be the investigator. "We recovered an item with your description. Call me in the morning." And then, as if the universe was tired of letting me sleep with only one thing in my head, another text from my dad, 2 words, this time, no punctuation. "He's detoxing." He wrote it like a weather report and went quiet. I lay there in the dark listening to my house settle and the heater hum and my kid in the next room roll over and sigh. Somewhere, a ring sat in a little plastic bag with a tag, and somewhere else, my brother was shaking on a bed that wasn't ours. I don't know if this is the turning or just another bend in a road we didn't build. Tomorrow I pick up a ring that belongs to the bones of our family and file another stack of papers that say a child belongs to his home. I make coffee. I label another folder. I drive my son to school and talk about filler episodes and training arcs and the way power-ups in real life are almost never loud. And if a man in a neon vest shows up again, I will open the door and tell him, as kindly as I can, that there is no Unit B here. There never was. Update 5. The ring was colder than jewelry should be. Evidence has a temperature, I learned. The property room sat under humming lights that make people look sallow and honest. A man with a name that sounded like a stamp met us at a counter scarred by 1,000 keys. He slid the little plastic bag across as if returning a fish you weren't supposed to catch. My mother put her glasses on like armor. The bag was clouded and ugly. The ring wasn't. It looked exactly like it did in the black and white photo of my grandmother's hands. Thin band, tiny row of stones that never tried to be a crown. The tag rattled when the clerk clipped it off. I expected some Hollywood moment, something orchestral. What we got was the click of the zipper and the sound my mother made that lives between a laugh and a wound. "It's yours," she said, but she was looking at me like she needed me to make that sentence safe. "Let's put it somewhere that isn't anyone's pocket," I said. At the bank, a woman with hair that didn't move led us into a vault that looked like an enormous hive. My husband signed his name in the neat, squared block letters he uses when he wants a paper to behave. The box slid out with the weight of something that knows it is not a box for snacks. We put the ring inside. I added the folder with our son's name and the tabs like fence posts. I had to stop myself from kissing the metal before it went back in. The lock shut with a sound that sits in your chest. My husband took my hand on the way out like we were leaving a church. Dad's weather text came mid-afternoon. Still detox. He followed with directions, as if I'd asked for them. I didn't, but I drove there anyway. The building used to be a dentist. You could tell by the way the windows were trying to be cheerful in a strip of sad signs you read twice on purpose. No belts, no strings, no visitors past this point. People shuffled in shoes that had seen too much pavement. A nurse with kindness welded to her voice took the bag I brought, the kind you can't tie, containing socks, a soft t-shirt, toothpaste that wasn't hotel-sized. "We'll log it," she said. "He's in the fog. He asked for you." "I'm not his emergency contact," I said. "Not now. Please put my father's number on whatever form he's waving around. And tell him we're fine." She knew exactly what that sentence meant and wrote nothing down for it. On the way out I passed a kid with a hospital bracelet who couldn't be more than 20 trying to convince a vending machine to give him a second soda. For all my talk about boundaries, I stood there a minute to make sure it did. The investigator from the state called back with the brisk mercy of someone who has to say unpleasant words before lunch. He confirmed the thing that had been forming around us. "We have sufficient evidence to open a case on the attempted dependency claim and the use of your child's information. You won't need to do anything else unless we ask." He had me verify our address twice. He told me when letters would come and what color the envelopes were. I asked him, because I needed to hear it from a stranger with a badge on a lanyard, if this would follow my son. "No," he said. "We tag it. We close it. It doesn't stick to him." He might as well have told me the river runs downhill. I needed it anyway. We met with the school's SRO in a room that smelled like dry erase markers and gym. He took my driver's license and our printed photo and the password we picked that would make no sense to anyone who hadn't sat through a Saturday morning anime binge. He slid the trespass paper over for our signatures. He wrote "Uncle" in quotes. The principal added a note nobody else would ever read, see also common sense. My son sat in the hallway with a sketchbook. When we came out, he flipped it around to show us a knight with a chain across his chest, not a lock, just the chain, looking like it was part of the armor. "Two on the nose?" he asked, proud. "Perfect," I said. "Frame it." The IRS got in line next. Their letter arrived with the kind of federal certainty that makes your palm sweat before you open it. We called, held, verified, repeated, and were told to come in anyway. The office lived behind glass in a building with an elevator that sulked. We waited on chairs designed to stop you from napping. The agent who called our number had the kind of blue pen you can't steal on purpose. She asked me my son's birthday twice, the second time without looking at her screen. When we were finished, she stamped something that didn't belong to me. "It'll shake loose," she said. "Give it a few weeks." I nodded like that timeline was a thing I could plug into my day planner under dinner. Nighthawk sent me a photo of a paper with her name on one side and Joe's on the other with the word order in the middle like a lake freezing over. She didn't caption it. She didn't have to. Later, when I was stirring a pot with one hand and scrolling with the other, I saw a post she made of a pair of hiking boots and a trail I couldn't name. The sky was the kind that makes you forgive things. I didn't show my husband. I didn't have to. He and she always liked different kinds of quiet. By evening, Detox called. A counselor with the voice of an elementary school librarian asked, politely, if I could provide a ride in the morning. "He's meeting with intake at a residential program," she said. "We encourage family support if appropriate." What a phrase. If appropriate. "I hope he goes," I said. "I'm not the ride." There was a pause on the line that held the exact weight of the word appropriate. "I'll tell him we'll arrange transport," she said. "I'm glad he has people who say no. My parents are learning the shape of no." Dad texted me a photo of a styrofoam cup with a black mark across the rim and the caption "Back to the room with coffee." Mom came by with an envelope and stood on the step again like it had become ritual. Inside were insurance papers, a copy of the police report, the receipt from the pawn shop that says $0, and the ring's appraisal from 1987. She asked me to add them to the box with the boys folder. "I think I breathe better knowing it's not under our roof," she said. Her eyes didn't move from mine. The air sat there between us like something you could sit on. We tried on a normal Thursday, garbage out, homework checked, a pot bubbling in a comforting way, and got 2 things in the space of 10 minutes. First, a delivery driver at the door with a printer addressed to Unit B, which made my husband laugh in that sharp way that isn't humor. Wrong house, he said. Wrong life. He carried it back to the truck like it was ticking. Second, a message from an unknown number that turned into a rehab intake nurse when I called back. He listed you as the person who would bring him clothes and pick him up if he leaves against advice, she said. Can you confirm? No, I said, and then realized that wasn't enough. Please remove my name from any place you can remove it. If he's here, do your job. If he leaves, that's his job. She made a note. I heard it in the keys. Dinner that night tasted like everything we'd thought about while it cooked. Our son pushed his broccoli around and then ate it like it was a dare. Training arc? He asked without looking up. More like cutscene, I said. The camera is on somebody else. We hold the line. He tapped his fork against his plate like a metronome and then stopped. I can hold lines, he said, like he'd just discovered a new trick he could actually do. Morning decided it wanted drama. My husband's car wouldn't start, which felt unfair given everything else we've been starting lately. While he was out front arguing with a battery, a uniform knocked. Not sirens. Not doom. Just a knock. The officer had a clipboard and that tired softness people get when they have to say certain things for a living. We're making notifications, he said, reading. Your brother is in possession of a summons related to the identity theft attempt. We have reason to believe he's avoiding service. If he shows up here, we can serve him if you call. I'm not expecting him, I said. But if he rings my doorbell again, I'll be calling either way. The officer nodded, then, surprisingly, asked about the sign on our storm door with language that could cut. Nighthawk wrote that? He said, half grinning like a kid who knows he's asking gossip. I didn't give him the satisfaction, just the answer. A lawyer did. I waited for the shoes to drop all day. They didn't. Instead I got a text in the late afternoon from Dad that said, he went. 3 words. No flourish. Just went. To the program, presumably. The bed. The hallway with linoleum and chairs bolted to the floor. I let my breath go in a way that didn't feel like relief so much as permission to breathe again next hour. I drove to the bank before they closed and added the appraisal and the report and the copy of the order with the stamp. The vault swallowed them whole. The clerk asked me if I wanted a second key. I told her I already had one, held it up, a little piece of brass that means more to me now than the house key ever did. Before bed, I did my rounds, locks, windows, the small chain. The house hummed. Our kid coughed in his sleep and rolled over. My phone lit on the nightstand and I let it do its little glow dance without picking it up, because whatever it had to say could live until morning. Somewhere, a man with my brother's face was trying to make it through an hour without walking out. Somewhere else, a ring settled into a darkness it deserved. We are not anyone's Unit B. We never were. And if the paper keeps coming, I will sign where I need to and stop where I have to and keep the folder labeled with a child's name in a box in a room in a building full of boxes. And I will make coffee in my chipped mug and tell my son, if he asks, that not all power-ups happen on screen. Some of them are in the hands you keep off the doorknob.